It looks like we have a really good number of folks here attending, so I'm going to go ahead and kick us off. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the College of Communication Arts and Sciences virtual talk on innovations in the gaming industry. My name is Matthew Jones, and I serve MSU in the College of ComArtSci as the Assistant Director for Alumni Relations. Thank you for attending today. While this is a webinar, we highly encourage you to ask questions that you have throughout the panel. And that can be done through the Q&A portion, the Q&A feature in your menu bar. We'll reserve some time either during or just after, towards the end of our discussion today to answer those questions. It is my privilege to introduce our moderator for today, Andrew Dennis. Andrew is an artist, designer, and instructor at MSU. Andrew is a CG generalist who currently teaches courses covering modeling, texturing, rigging, animation, environment design, character art, and much, much more. Andrew also has a few favorite games: BioShock, TIE Fighter, Overwatch, and I'm sure many more. Andrew, thank you for doing this for us today.
Thank you, Matt. I guess I can no longer say no one on the second floor knows what I do, because clearly that's not true. Did your homework there. It's my pleasure to be here to moderate this panel discussion with these really incredible alumni, and I'd like to introduce them to you all today. So I'll be introduce their names. They're going to give a brief bio of themselves. So I'd love to start here with Eric Argel from PlayStation. Eric. Hi, my name is Eric. Like you see, I graduated from Michigan State in 01 in telecommunications. I'm a designer. Been a designer for the last 2 decades. And I've been in the industry for well over a decade. And I am glad to be here. Thank you. Great, thanks, Eric. We also have someone who's going to be very familiar to a lot of you, Carrie Heater. Carrie.
Thanks, Andrew. So I came to Michigan State when I was 17 years old in 1974, and majored in communication, was doing interactive instructional and public television, started the Communication Technology Laboratory to do interactive TV, virtual reality, hypermedia, and eventually games. I will be retiring this May. So this is sort of my entire life. I have never left Michigan State. It was just too awesome. I've stayed the whole time. I am honored to have been a teacher of Eric's and a teacher of Andrew's and a number of other people over these many years. And my current focus is meditation. So we'll get to that.
Great to have you here, Carrie. And lastly, I'd like to introduce Brian Murray from Electronic Arts. Brian.
Hey there. Like Eric, I'm a telecom major. I also got, at the time, it was called a Cognate, which was in English film, and did study abroad at the British Film Institute, where I fell in love with documentary filmmaking. And then when I graduated, I went to New York and became a documentary and commercial cinematographer and filmmaker. And then after 10 years of that, the video game industry started calling and saying, hey, we need our games are looking better, but there aren't people in the filmmaking and visual space to help us make it feel better. So after 10 years in filmmaking, I left and I like to say sold out and went to the video game world. And so I am now the senior creative director at Electronic Arts, and I oversee games like Madden, future games like college football. I've worked on Star Wars and multiple games like that, and then a bunch of different IPs. And then I think I inadvertently probably work with Eric every once in a while, even though that we've never met. So happy to be here. And that picture is from like 10 years ago, and when I was not gray.
Thanks for joining us, Brian. I'll be asking a series of questions and just trying to help move the discussion along. But for those of you who are watching, feel free to ask questions in the comments. If it's relevant to discussion, Matthew can help out with that. But Brian, you actually kind of jumped a little bit into the first question I want to start with already, which was, if you want to touch on this more, but I want to know from the other panelists as well, how did you go from MSU to where you are today? How did your education at MSU help you forge your own path into your current discipline?
Well, I touched on it. So do you want to start with Eric or Carrie?
That'd be great. Well, let's go with Eric. Oh, let's go with Eric.
Okay. Put me on the spot.
Yeah. Great way to start the panel.
My career or my path was a pretty long one. I was attracted to the communications ComArts degree just for the fact that it felt like there was a bit more art and design involved with technology. They kind of married each other at the time, versus just an engineering degree or an art degree. I felt like that was a good marriage of those two. So for me, that's the path I went down. And it got me acquainted pretty closely with the internet and design itself. When I graduated, it was during the dot-com bust. So a lot of companies were downsizing. So it was actually kind of harder to find a job at that time. And because I had a degree at Michigan State, it basically it opened the door for me to basically get interviewed and get a job. So in a lot of ways, I come back to MSU because it was a path that it basically opened the doors for me. And then from then on, it really was training on the job. A lot of it was kind of learning, because at the time there was no degrees around it. Now I think there's you can get doctorates degrees, in my specific field. But a lot of it was learning and on the field. And that's where I moved. Went from Michigan, and then I went straight to San Francisco, and I've been here now for the last 15 years. But yeah, that was in a nutshell, that was my path.
Great. And Carrie, how about yourself?
So my whole life, I've been fascinated by designing and studying experiences and how emerging technologies could enable new kinds of experiences that couldn't be had before. So when I say I worked in virtual reality, I'm talking about the late 1980s and 1990s. And so we were constantly studying things that never became anything. They would be cool ideas and then they would sort of disappear. And games was the same thing. When they were excitingly coming out, as, oh, we can do this kind of interactive experience that people could do. And Brian Wynn started teaching game classes. We had no idea this would become something as huge as it was. Right. And so at the time, games classes were taught by people who'd never had a class in what they were teaching, and so now it's so specialized and everything like that. And so games came to me, I didn't come to them. But of course, that's where you go right now. So it's been amazing watching the professionalization of it and the growth of it as an industry and as something to study and something that's ever changing. So.
Thanks. And I know, Brian, you already touched a little bit on moving from sort of film and television production into games, but if you could touch a little bit, as we have this discussion on how that film and TV production, how do you use that today in a game-centric world?
Well, it's funny. It's I normally am fighting with someone saying hey, listen, we're trying to reinvent the wheel, but film's been around for 150 years. So can we just follow the people that have already made the mistakes and they've bettered themselves for it? But with video games, we're always trying to reinvent the wheel. So what I did personally was I went from filmmaking, and then they hired me at EA. I moved to Florida from Manhattan, which was jarring enough. And I went there and said, okay, I'm going to close my mouth, open up my ears, and just open my mouth when I can speak to things that I actually can speak to. But other than that, just learn. And so I have found myself to be the cinematographer of electronic arts, but also then in the last 8 years, I've really moved towards the audio side, the UI UX side being a huge part of it, and then working with my designers. There, I can tell you, are just so many jobs, just to be the super positive one in the group for a second. There are just so many jobs in this industry. Interactive is nuts. I mean, we cannot hire more people fast enough. And so, sorry, to get back to your question, basically they said, hey, can you do me a favor and just usher us into the cinematic future? Talk about what you know, don't talk about what you don't know. And that's what we did. And I think we made basically a 4-hour Pixar level film within 2 years, and worked with Academy Award winning actors and actresses. And then, we just went, it's the same thing. I mean, for me, it's the only different. My friends like to make fun of me, and they say, like, oh, you're lifting virtual cameras now. And I mean, I probably operated 10,000 shots in the last year physically with a camera. So, like, I'm still making movies. It just so happens that our users get to make decisions.
Yeah, I'd love to dive deeper a little bit into that space. Brian, what you're discussing, I tell my students every day, you couldn't possibly be picking a better time to graduate right now, as it's just exploding. I would love to hear from a little bit more from yourself and Eric and Carrie about what are the kind of opportunities for maybe new alumni or graduating students that to head into this industry. What do the kind of opportunities look like?
Well, like, I'll jump in real quick just because it's at the top of my head. We talk about this on our alumni group, obviously, that I'm a part of, and we say that, like, there's no difference. If you get an audio degree from Michigan State, which is a very good degree, you can immediately work in video games. If you like to edit video, if you work in UI UX or graphic design, which is a common term paired with UI user experience. I mean, these jobs are directly the same exact thing. It really is that. Graphic design is graphic design wherever you go. UI versus in graphic design, meaning, like, for me, for instance, let's say football, right? You've got your ticker, right? You've got your score, you've got your this is this person's name and their statistics and stuff like that. I mean, that's Photoshop. It doesn't matter where you go, what you're working in, that's Photoshop. That's some special video gamey magic that's happening. Same thing with orchestras. I work with original orchestras from LA to Nashville to London. Same thing with Foley design. Same thing with cinematography and lighting. The lighting side just is all going so physical based. And what I mean by physical based is I'm going to a location like outside of my house in Orlando, and I can measure the light with probes and photography. And within that same day, I can put that same lighting within the game. So we call it physical based because I'm just measuring lighting and putting it within the game. So what really are we talking about here? I mean, it's not video games versus filmmaking. Video games, it is just interactive media. For me, the only difference is at some point we're dealing with animation. And then I'll shut up and let everyone else.
Oh, it's great. Eric, do you want to touch on that? What kind of opportunities do you see from where you're sitting?
Oh, geez. I mean, coming from, my focus, and Brian was kind of talking a little bit about it, but I'm on the UI UX side, and right now, everyone is hiring them. That's the thing, and no one can keep them, and they're trying to poach from each other. So, I mean, the more that people look into that career, there's so many opportunities that they can get involved in, even just graduating from Michigan State. I mean, here, at PlayStation, we have a pretty robust internship program and everything. So we always pick up a lot of folks that really have I'd say a passion in design. UI UX is a pretty broad field. I mean, it really consists of visual designers to UX designers, which really focus on the architecture and the information hierarchy and information in terms of how it's displayed to the user. Really diving into that field, there's just so many different ways or paths that a user can go, or a person can go down. I think if anyone's even remotely interested in it and wants to be able to jump, not even just in the video game industry, but really a lot of industries in general, UI UX is a really great field to jump into right now.
Can't find enough of them.
Yeah, there's everyone wants to hire them. So
yep, they don't exist, and essentially in a lot of ways they're editors, which is very funny because like you use XD, Eric.
I do, yeah.
Yeah, so Adobe XD is a great platform to be able to share your user experience. But really, all that we're talking about when we say user experience is how does the user experience, but how does your user feel that flow? And
Yeah.
is that jarring? Is that an immersion breaker? Are we possibly saying that we have too many windows? We have too much going on, and how do we work with that span of time that someone can have between playing and making decisions? And
Yep.
so much of that is editing. And
Yeah.
so Adobe XD, like,
Yeah, I mean, we use Adobe XD, Adobe XD, but Sketch and Figma.
yep,
We use a lot over at my company, and we have our own proprietary tools. I think like the thing that you mentioned too is that, it's like people will notice the UX of something when they have problems.
Mhm.
And when they have problems, they're like, why does it work like this? Why does it do this? And when you have a really good UX, people don't notice it at all. And that's actually a blessing because they won't be like, wow, it's like, this just works. Everything is put together real nice. And, it's really easy to tell when you start seeing bad UX. I mean, it's as simple as like looking at a McDonald's menu versus looking at an In-N-Out menu. There's not too many choices. You can get straight to what you want versus you're looking at another menu where there's so many choices. So
Sure.
I think like the job of a UX designer is, like you were saying, is to keep the user, especially in video games, immersed. I mean, that's a big thing we talk about at PlayStation is immersion. We always want to keep our users deeply immersed in their games. So not having a menu that doesn't work or not being able to change out your gear load or make a call on the fly. We really want to make it part of UX. And it's not just part of just graphics either. It's especially when you're talking about video games, it's how a user actually interacts with the controller, how a user actually interacts with the screen. So putting those pieces together, I think is a fun challenge, honestly. And it's a video game. So, it's a really good subject matter to work on.
I agree. And like, I can end us out on this. Sorry, give Carrie a shot. The idea being, I say the same. It's funny, Eric, you said the same thing, that it's immersion breakers. So I love when people talk about cinematography in the game that I work on and the games that I work on, where they talk about, hey, can you make that really cool shot? I'm really excited for that really cool shot. And I always say, listen, yes, I am here to be primarily one of the cinematographers, but I personally believe that good cinematography goes unnoticed because it's actually not about the cool shot. It's about the story and it's about the subject and about how we're trying to point the eye. So yeah, immersion breakers are a really big thing. And then the other thing for UI UX, and then I'll stop there, is that I don't want to create bathroom breaks. And I kind of always say that I'm like, is that window creating a bathroom break where someone wants to hit pause or not make a decision and obviously one run to the washroom or go get a drink or whatever, things like that. So yeah.
That's great. Thanks. And Eric, I like that menu analogy. It's like a nice way of really bringing that home.
Yeah.
Carrie, if I can bring this kind of question to you and transition us into the next thing I wanted to touch on here. In terms of opportunities for people in the space, you've seen it evolve and change so much. What are you really seeing on the horizon for games, this virtual reality space, social media as a game? Like, where do you see our human and computer interaction going? When, after that, kind of with Eric and Brian as well, what do you see on the horizons for your companies and where you're at?
Well, actually, I'm going to answer the question you asked.
Oh,
before
please.
First. Okay.
Yes.
But first, because of Brian talking, I think I need a bathroom break. Oh, just. No, but taking a different perspective. So you were asking how people can get into the game industry, and that's of course a great concern and great interest. But one of the programs that Michigan State has offered for a long time now is the Serious Game Graduate Certificate Program. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people use that program to bring games into their industry or into what they're doing. And so this is something that people anywhere in the world can and do enroll in, as well as our master's and PhD students. And it's a 3-course sequence. And so we have people learning enough about games that they become kind of the game person in their company. For example, the Michigan Department of Natural Resources So a person went through the program and now she's their game guru who's bringing games to natural resources. We have people from Fortune 500 companies. We have physicians, we have faculty members, we have many teachers who come in and bring games into their classroom. And so the whole idea of what is a game and how do you design a game and how does it fit into life for whatever purposes. So that's another of the ways that games is touching us.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's huge. Like I've seen how this technology can be used in other formats and things like that. And there's a doctor named Dr. Andrews. He invented the Tommy John surgery, which is the famous wrist surgery that happens with pitchers and javelin athletes and things like that. And quarterbacks have had it too. But he also has a massive medical facility in multiple states. And I worked in motion capture for a very long time. Obviously, that's the IR with all the balls on you, and they measure movement. And in the medical fields, I mean, it's pretty massive and very much growing. And I do know that our Michigan State gaming degree, they do have an HTC Vive motion capture volume. And I'm speaking to Michigan State, the football team, about this and coach in May or in April. And I do encourage us to record it and try to get more involved with our athletics program as far as that works. There's a quarterback named RG3, Robert Griffin, that I worked with after he had knee surgery, and he worked with Dr. Andrews. And this was when I was working with EA already, and I was filming a documentary with him. And they did the same exact thing we do in gaming. They put the markers on him. They put him on a treadmill for his double knee surgery, and they measured using the same exact programs that we would use at Michigan State to look at his run flow and look at what it looks like, where, is he straight and narrow, or do we have to make adjustments, things like that. So I think that my sister graduated from Lyman Briggs. And so, where my whole family bleeds green. And so and she talked about that too, where it's like, I mean, there are opportunities exactly like what Carrie's talking about, where there are cross interactive, degrees that we should be looking into and trying to stretch out to.
We had a PhD student in Greece, and he was working with a team doing self-driving cars. And they created a game to model how pedestrians would behave among the cars that they could then learn about making the cars do better. Endless applications for games.
That's cool.
Absolutely. And, Carrie, sorry for skipping you on the new opportunities question. I do really want to hear, though, your take on where you see the gaming space going in the future and what kind of innovations maybe you're really excited about.
Well, I really like the Niantic, the augmented reality kinds of games, sort of bringing games into life in different ways and things like that, so that you can be projecting and seeing things that aren't there and interacting with them, both in terms of support and playfulness. It's all the same for me. So like, instead of just going to a museum and you're at the museum or at a zoo or whatever, right? Then you've got the augmented reality gaming, and it's changing that experience, and you're taking pictures, and you're maybe they've got motion capture of the lions, and I don't know. I mean, everything can just become more and more interactive and more connected, and it just changes the design of the experience. What if in Zoom we had that here, right? So we could be, ones of us who aren't talking could be causing different things to be happening or planning or touching lives. So that's sort of a not very coherent answer, but it's the same stuff. It's just like super exciting.
Yeah. I was excited too to hear, thinking about, you've been doing so much really interesting work in meditation and doing a lot of Zoom meditations and digital meditation. And do you see that as becoming an interactive space for therapy or meditation using these platforms or technologies?
So I came to games and started working on serious games. And the people in games were mad at me at first, going, "You're taking away our fun. What are you doing making it serious?" Right? And then I came to meditation. And for me, it's like really fun. And the people who were teaching meditation is like, "What do you mean this is fun?" It's like, "Oh yeah, no, it is." So like we did the childhood play meditation. and different kinds of meditation objects and things like that. So meditation uses the technology of the mind and the body to have experiences, which is actually how we have experiences anyway. Mm-hmm. So I worked with a PhD student on his dissertation is how do we bring meditation into the gaming space? So we had people do a 5-minute meditation before playing Tetris, and other people who just sat there doing nothing. And we looked at the difference in how they approached the play and how good they were at it and things like that. And so there may well be some integration of that over time, because this is really the technology that we use for all of our experiences. And so enhancing, so there's actually the concept of flow in meditation as well. There's easy fun, hard fun, serious fun, and people fun in meditation. So I'm actually writing a book about those parallels right now. So
fascinating. Look forward to checking that out. Eric, do you want to talk a little bit maybe on what's on the horizon for you at PlayStation and UI UX?
Yeah. There's so my focus is the operating system, right? So I work on the PS5 operating system, and basically how users connect, how they play, and how they share. I've been pretty close to the PS5 just in terms of what's been happening. And I mean, I know there's a couple of things that are on the horizon, but I would like to also point out some things that have just also occurred too recently, which is, I think is pretty cool. But the controllers that are now coming out are pretty nice because if you think about it, the user's connection or a player's connection to video games is either through a controller or like a mouse and keyboard. And when you start looking at the controllers that were just put out recently, there's like now haptic feedback and adaptive triggers. So I mean, you can even think about like in a football game, you're throwing a football, you can feel the tension of throwing that football as you're pulling on that trigger, and it really provides like a deeper immersion within these games. You can even feel like when you're pulling a bow and arrow, just how that feels when you're actually triggering that. I think VR is also another big thing too that's happening. You see Oculus and HTC Vive doubling down on their headsets. Then the interesting thing to know about those is that they no longer have any type of wires. If you look at the first generation of them, they were wired down. So like turning around or doing any type of movement was really kind of impeding that. Now you're seeing things that don't allow it. See, yeah, Brian's showing them off right there. And when you start seeing the resolution on these things, they're turning up even more. I think even HTC Vive, they both said it's like a 5K resolution, even though I think it's like 2048 on each eye. But I mean, when you start looking at just how the resolution and the technology is moving faster on that, there's actually a ton of new innovation that could happen within that space alone. And we're talking about just even things of like how a user even glances and what's their view when they're looking at a menu or things of that nature when they're in a VR space that are not the same when you are looking at a screen, which is very flat. But I think there's like really cool things in that. And then ray tracing too is a big thing that's actually happened in the industry in the past year or so. A lot of the video cards like NVIDIA and AMD have supported it. But when you start looking at ray tracing, you can see the quality of the graphics just improve by it's insane to see how well the games now look when you compare them to like 10 years ago. And ray tracing is now supported in the latest consoles. So you were looking at the Xbox Series X and the PlayStation 5. We will support ray tracing now, and it's pretty amazing. I mean, I've been playing a couple of games that support it, like Control. And when you're looking at just how the game looks, it almost looks like you're watching a movie. Because a lot of those pixels are being created on the fly. And it's really amazing. But I think like when you start looking in the future, accessibility is a big thing that's happening right now. And a lot of video game companies are putting more attention towards that because they're realizing that their player base is very varied. So, and we start looking at accessibility over here at PlayStation, we've created a whole new set of design rules just around that. So if it's anything from the screen talking to you, so you can hear it, to adjusting font sizes, text sizes, and even looking at color blindness too, and what colors people can see. accessibility is becoming more and more of a big thing. You'll start seeing in the video game industry, like a lot of publishers will start supporting more, and they'll actually tout these as features. So I think like when you start looking at these, to me, those are like kind of the innovations that are happening within that have happened, occurred now, and then are going to happen within the next couple of years.
Absolutely. It's great. Brian, horizons, innovations, things that you're working on that you're really excited about.
I feel like I work for Eric. I mean, everything Eric just said, I was like, oh, I'll talk about accessibility. He's like, then accessibility. Yeah, I mean, obviously, just to double down a little bit, the accessibility side is pretty massive, has been for us for about 4 years. There are things like, I didn't realize the stats on epilepsy. And being creative director, and we have a lot of like pops and flashes and strobes and things like that, and we can literally cause someone to have a seizure. So it's a little bit of a learning curve. But I learned, for instance, about epilepsy that it's not about repetitive lights; it's about the luminance level of the light. Like I mean, I'm just you're constantly learning, and I do love that about this job, though. And I always have the mantra that if you consider yourself a master of anything, you might as well just retire. So like we're constantly learning. I like actually like Harry and Eric, like I'm really excited to not have this thing hang from my face. I like the AR part of it. I like Eric said, it's wireless now. Very cool. But I'm excited for that like next thing. I'm excited for the Minority Report, if you understand that reference, where it's called rear retina projection, where it might be invasive and hopefully we can turn it off, but you can like walk around and see that projection without having to have anything on your face. I think that'll be really cool. As far as accessibility and what I just said, as far as real retina, I'm excited to make decisions with my eyes. A lot of people are, don't have the correct use of their either dexterity or appendages, and it would be very cool to play the current game that I'm on right now, which is Madden, and be able to select a play, be able to throw the ball and know who I want to throw it to with my eyes. And that technology exists right now. So it would be great to adopt some really cool non-marketing based innovations. I think that lastly, one of the things I'm very excited about is machine learning. I think that we are able to, I'm not talking about AI, and I'm not talking about like Terminator and like they're going to take over the world. What I'm talking about is just the fact that like the camera systems that I'm building right now is a little bit in the world of AI, where I don't know where the player is going to go. I don't know if the player is going to go right or left. So the camera kind of has to account for reacting. We teach our systems how to react based on thousands, in some cases millions of examples of this is going to happen this way, this is going to happen that way, and then like teaching our machines to learn that way. And I think that it'd be really cool for us, like as an example, to say, hey, there was a really cool play that happened on Sunday. There was a really cool play that happened. We've never seen it before. It'd be great to take that video of the game, feed it in, and have the computer learn that that happened, and this is how we could have reacted to it. And then on Monday, have that be in the game. And just teaching and learning that way. But also, Eric, your dog needs water, man. Like clearly your dog keeps hitting the bowl and is now staring at you in the video camera.
Wait, I have a dog?
Yeah. So anyway, so that's where I stand on it. There's so much innovation to be there. And as Eric's saying, with the with the engine work and ray tracing and things like that, we call it the uncanny valley, where like I do a lot of virtual cinematography, which is in the VR space, where I'm holding a camera on my shoulder and I'm walking around virtually in my scene, and we hit play on the scene, and then we record all of my camera movements, and I can show a video of that at some point if you'd like. He actually went and got him water. And I will say the uncanny valley side of it, sometimes those characters look at the camera and I freak out. Like I actually think that the character's looking at me because it just looks so real. So we're getting there. And the game that I play is Detroit. Go Michigan. State of Michigan, the state of Michigan. And I don't know if you played Detroit, but Detroit's a really cool game. It looks beautiful.
PlayStation Studios game.
I know it is. I'm gonna send you my resume after this, Eric.
Brian, you should play that video since you just offered it.
Okay, I can. Yeah, absolutely. It's a little marketing-ish, just so you know. You see it?
Yep.
The director camera is a wireless and physical device that you use within a mocap stage.
That's me.
It's designed to record the camera movements against the animation cycles. It records these animations in Motion Builder and can stream the content through to a game engine such as Frostbite. Additionally to this, you can hire a cinematographer that has years of experience with physical cameras, and they can manipulate this camera the same way that they would on a film set. And you're actually acquiring all of those camera paths, all of those camera curves. It brings a level of realism and a level of detail that hand keying alone can't achieve.
The DCAM system is incredibly easy to use. I'm used to using real-world physical cameras. That's exactly what the DCAM system is. It's a real-world camera.
The Director camera was built to be versatile. It's very modular and flexible. We built it with standardized mounts, so it can attach to Steadicams, it can attach to tripods, dollies, drones, jib arms. We can basically change the Director camera to create any shot that you need.
One of the most amazing things that's subtle is that the feeling of these cameras in the game have a weight and a presence that you'll never get from a hand-animated camera. So an animator is often replicating what they think somebody would do. You're getting exactly what somebody would do filming it.
So to me, the DCAM is two things, efficient and authentic. So we could shoot about 100 cameras in one day compared to an animator making about 3 takes a day.
I think without DCAM, we would not have got to what people are saying feels like a movie.
Nice.
Cool.
Love it. Thanks for sharing that, Brian.
Yeah.
Carrie, you wanted to touch a little bit on sort of a innovation in your, like, maybe the educational space, please.
Brian, that was awesome. Thank you for sharing that. And by the way, I want to control things with my mind, not just my eyes, but that's this little head. So because this is an alumni association podcast, I thought I would share a very local innovation that's really much smaller scale, but East Lansing now has its first very own game company that is associated with Michigan State University. It's called Will Win Games, and it started in September. And the lab that I started became the GEL lab, the Games for Entertainment and Learning. And so Plunder Panic Pirates is not actually educational, but this is linked to MSU, and it's a place where games that students come up with can become commercialized and things like that. It's a place where students can get their first job opportunity and things like that. So I just thought that would be kind of cool for alumni to know that there is now an East Lansing game company. Will Win Games just started. So just
it's a really fun game too. So that's a big pro. Thanks for bringing us to that, Carrie. Something that I'm really happy that Eric, you brought up, and Brian, you also talked a lot, because our accessibility was something I really wanted to touch on. And I want to open that up broader to say, like, there's a lot of discussion happening around games as culture and how games are addressing both within their media, but within the companies themselves, some of the social and racial equity issues that surround games as a media and as an industry. And I'd like to know a little bit about how your companies, your spaces are addressing those issues.
Should I go, or?
Yeah, Eric, I'd love for you to kick us off here.
Yeah, we at PlayStation, we take it pretty seriously. We actually have a lot of different internal groups that are actually dedicated to the different types of minorities that are out there. We have things like DEI, API, Pride, Unidos, Vets, Women. These are all different groups that are at PlayStation that are actually they're sponsored by executives, so they actually have a big voice at our company. I mean, let's look at reality, and the fact is that video games are a pretty global media, and to get the best ideas, you really have to represent the players that you're actually creating the content for. So I know at PlayStation we brought in a lot of people of different backgrounds, and because in the end it brings different ideas to the table. People think about like problems or issues in a different way than other people do, and you can take the best of those and really create something great. But yeah, we've been doing a lot of that over at PlayStation. We even have a new senior director that's really pushing our diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives there. So, and you're getting actually, not even just PlayStation, but you're really seeing that across tech in general right now. I think there was a reckoning that happened, a couple years back, and they're really starting to take a look, really taking an internal look at themselves and being able to say, all right, is our employee base, is it diverse? Are we really looking at bringing in people of different ideas? It's kind of actually, it reminds me a bit like university. You really want to bring in people that have a lot of different stories. And I think that's really what's happening right now in a lot of the tech companies that you're looking at. And it's not just video games, but even the Googles and the Apples and the Metas of the world. So, yeah.
Carrie or Brian, like Carrie's been in this space for a while. What are your thoughts?
Well, I think it's really hard to do and incredibly important. And the game industry has historically had a lot of issues with it and still is having growing pains with the bullying things that are going on and that kind of thing. But it's wonderful to hear what Eric is talking about, that people are working on it and things like that. It's also known for crunch, right? For incredible work hours. And there's been some interesting innovations in terms of companies trying out 4-day work weeks and 32-hour weeks and trying to do that with tracking productivity to say, are we losing stuff or are we gaining? Are we staying the same and things like that? So I think there's a ton of soul searching related to that and a lot of good work going on. There was a study at Carnegie Mellon that showed that the more diverse teams had more conflict and produced more innovative games in the game company, and where everybody is the same, it's nice and easy, but you don't get the range of ideas that come up. So, and we also, one more, we have Elizabeth LaPonce on our faculty, and she's one of the top women in the game industry, and she's also really been instrumental in the idea of Indigenous games, which are games created by Indigenous people and also for and about them and things like that. And so it's wonderful having her at Michigan State pioneering that.
Yeah, thank you, Carrie. And I'm glad you brought up Beth's work. All the alumni watching should definitely check out Beth LaPonce's work, award-winning work, we should say. That's really incredible things. Thank you for that answer. Brian, do you want to touch a little bit on how in your space over at EA, you're addressing some of these social issues?
I mean, both of you just touched on like 10 things. I don't even know really where to begin. I'll start at the end. I work primarily, obviously, out of Orlando, Florida, where Madden gets made. But I spend, pre-COVID, I would spend almost 2 weeks a month during my entire year in Vancouver, where First Nation is incredible and incredibly influential for us. And I work with lots of First Nation, like it's incredible. I'm sorry, maybe that's more of a Canadian term that's used, but First Nation's a huge Indigenous, obviously, and First Nation is a huge term, and we have holidays through Canada, and Canada is a very influential country for us because Vancouver, we employ thousands of employees there. So yeah, I mean, I'm fully hand in hand with you on there on that direction there. And then you go to the accessibility side, and then yeah, I mean, we call them ERGs. They're focus groups. I don't know, Eric, what you call those groups. Are you called ERGs with you?
Yeah, we call them ERGs too.
Okay, yeah. So they're called ERGs with us. I would say one thing I can't solve. I can't solve people going on Twitter and complaining about me and complaining about what I'm working on. What we can solve is the content that we're making for ourselves and our consciences, and our moral integrity that we, as a standard that our company, that Electronic Arts focuses on. So we have groups that review scenes. We have groups that review what we're doing, how we're making it, why we're making it, that are representative of what I think is a beautiful, well-rounded group of people. Do I think that we're perfect? Not at all. Do I think that there are some realities when someone's looking for authenticity in sports that you can't necessarily get around sometimes? But I do think that we're pushing the envelope with multiple groups. I mean, when obviously we are talking about things like race and culture and the accessibility. We're saying accessibility, but I also mean, like, we had our first amputee coach in a scene this cycle, which I was super jacked up about. A friend of mine got in a really bad car accident and lost her leg. So like, I was excited to bring, actually Carrie asked me earlier to talk about more jobs. I hired one of my best friends to come in and talk about the fact that she has a carbon fiber leg, and what does that mean for sports, and what does that mean for life. And I think that also touches on being well-rounded. You know, that there are just so many, we're all made differently, and we all have different stuff that happens, and you know, and it was really cool to have her come in and be like, well, I'm looking at your art, and that's not the way that my leg would move. And it was really, really cool to have her come in, and that obviously is a medical touch there and things like that. But no, I would probably say, even on the record, and we're recording this, is one of our number one priorities are those ERG groups. I would say it's tough. However, it's also tough, right? So it's tough to say, like, hey, this scene is on the top. Specifically, I had a scene that was on top of a building in Tokyo, and to try to represent as many people as we wanted to represent at the scene on the top of a building in Tokyo is a tough problem to be trying to tell a story. But I think we do not our best, but I think that we are moving towards that being a conscious priority. That's the best way I can probably say that.
Thank you for your honest and very earnest answers there. Great from all the panelists. Matthew, I see you popped in.
Yes, we've actually had a couple of questions about metaverse. And so I'll ask the question that's in the chat here. Can you speak a little about how Facebook's metaverse and other social media might impact where gaming and other interactive 3D media is going? And any of you can jump in.
We also had a remote question that I want to make sure that we touch.
Yes, we can do that as well.
Jessica asked a remote question, just so we don't miss that before we're done. Sorry, but metaverse, right. Somebody.
Yeah, metaverse, and then we'll do the remote question.
Should I take
it?
Well,
please.
Okay. Yeah, I think, like, you're starting to see things are moving in that direction. I don't know if it's really going to be what Meta is saying right now. I mean, if you think about, like, Second Life, it's been around for like last 20 years. And that was the whole take on that was the whole metaverse. And I actually worked there for a couple of years at Second Life. So it was one of those things where even our founder at the time, he really got into the idea of even predates Matrix, but the idea of being in a virtual world. And it almost was before its time. I think if Second Life came out now, it would actually be more ideal with the headsets. But back then, you always had to go through a screen. And I think, like, a lot of it has been tested so far. I don't know necessarily if we're going to be in a metaverse, but I think experiences, be experiencing things in VR is really fascinating. I've seen, I've played a number of, and they don't really even call them games; they just call them like experiences, but like stories. And you can actually go in and see how a whole thing plays out and in a 3D space and look around, and it's pretty amazing. And I think like you're going to start seeing more things move in that direction. And until, like Brian was saying, when headsets get a lot more lighter, really realistically, you can't really have those on for longer than like a couple hours before you get fatigue. But I think when everything starts clicking, you'll start seeing a lot more games and experiences in VR. But it's really, really early to see how that's actually going to play out right now.
Awesome. Brian?
Ditto. He said it. I've got nothing more. I've got nothing more to add. I think that it's just all going more towards, that. Right. That's it. That's all I got for you.
Carrie, your thoughts? Oh, ditto as well. Definitely, we saw a couple questions on remote work, and a few of you touched a little bit on how COVID has changed some of your approaches to things. Love to hear from everybody, and maybe I'll start here with you, Brian, on how has COVID changed your work in particular? How has that changed remote working? What sort of workplace changes do you see happening moving forward?
So because that was Jessica's question to start, Jessica, your last statement, you're totally right. We got to get the hell away from the Facebook-based machine. So yeah, I mean, it's flipped my world completely upside down. So for me, I'm used to being on sets, directing motion capture, shooting virtual cameras, obviously being in my studio where hallway conversations matter. There is no such thing as water coolers. There's no such thing as a hallway conversation anymore, where work kind of gets done. Work would just, now my day ends normally at 6, and it's because the meeting ends at 6, so you're done. And so now all my time is incredibly scheduled, where lunchtime doesn't matter anymore. If there is an open point in my schedule, it is booked, and I'm on a Zoom call, and my dog is, pissed off behind me, whichever hand that is. And like that is my new world. I am using robots to direct shoots, where they're called Beam, where it's basically, if you've ever seen Big Bang Theory, they basically did like an episode about it, where I'm basically an iPad with my face, and it's on wheels, and I'm driving it with a joystick on film sets with people that have masks on, and they're right behind plexi. And I walk up, and I have to ask people to hit buttons for me on elevators so I can go to another level, because I'm a robot. And that's how I create presence on my sets now. It's very, very tough. There's a technology gap that we have also, where this room, I work in color and final art a lot, and this room is not. This is my library. It's messy right now, but this is my library, and it's not exactly conducive for final color, for final judgments of art. So we have to figure out so many solutions. It's been, people have had it tougher than me because I'm standing in my library in Orlando. But what I'm trying to say is that as far as the comfortability and being productive and things like that, has just been almost impossible to be able to direct 3 video games from Orlando when we have just so much going on. Now the positive side of that I teach the Michigan State students when I talk to them is the availability for them to find jobs is huge right now. They don't have to be in San Francisco. They don't have to be in LA. They don't have to be in New York. They can be getting those jobs from Michigan because everyone's working remotely right now. And they should be just knocking virtual doors down to get that job now, because when we do come out of this nightmare, they will be paying to move people to different cities. So show your worth now from wherever the heck you are, whether you're in your parents' basement or not. So that's where I'm at.
Awesome answer, Brian. Carrie, a little bit about maybe how COVID has changed some of your work and some of your research, maybe in your teaching.
I'll talk about the teaching It's been heartbreaking in terms of, just what the students are going through. And the fact that they are isolated. If they're a grad student, they're in their apartment and they mostly couldn't leave, especially during the first year of COVID. And the playtesting and observing people playing and observing spaces and doing research. I mean, it has affected all aspects of it in heartbreaking ways. We started using the in-person classes, starting out with sparkles of joy and personal sharing and first checking, do you have a way to get food right now? Are you okay? What joyful thing happened? And so we need to use the scheduled time more informally some. So one of the starts of class, though, was so cool. One of the students who was living with his parents in Grand Rapids had just come back from jogging 3 miles. And he went on Google Maps Street View and showed us the path through the cornfields that he had run. And a student who was logged in from Beijing pointed his camera out the window of his 7th floor apartment and then went to a website that showed pictures of the park in Beijing that he runs through. So there's connectivity. And what Brian was saying is, people are interviewing from jobs from their homes and their parents' homes. And so, we're learning skills, but we need to learn the more socializing, informal work stuff to channel it through these things.
I get to ditto that as well. Absolutely. Thank you for that. And Eric, a little too, maybe if you can include some thoughts on remote work and how that's also affected some of your work in PlayStation.
Yeah, it's been an interesting year, 2 years that we've been under COVID. I think like a lot of it, like what Brian and Carrie were saying, is like the work from home challenges, especially when you have a family. It can be really tough because it's really like, when does work time and then when does family time begin? You have to determine what between those two. And then even the work from home. A lot of it at my company is, I used to travel a lot. I go to Tokyo, and then, we'd have like work sessions and everything out there. But with, I think like what's happened is that a lot of companies are now looking at, well, do we really need to send people to these different places now, or is it really needed? And can it just all be done virtually? For me personally, I think some of it can, but there's something to be said when you're actually right next to the person. You can just go, hey, I have this idea. What do you think of this? And without having to use Slack, without having to send an email, without having to jump on WebEx or Zoom, I think it's really nice to be able to like interact with someone right next to you and then just whiteboard stuff versus having to set up a formal meeting and doing that. So, I think this is basically the new normal. I think people will get back to the office, but it's going to be one of those things where even at PlayStation, we're looking at flex schedules. So it's, what will that mean for the future? And if that's going to be what most companies will be doing moving forward, we'll have to see. But yeah, COVID's definitely affected a lot of companies in different ways. But I think the biggest thing right now, if you look at the industry, is because of the supply chain problems, is that you're having chip shortages right now that are happening. So even with PlayStation, when we're trying to ship out so many consoles, we're actually limited by the chips that we can actually acquire. So it's a problem that a lot of different industries, I know even Apple started cannibalizing their iPads for iPhone parts. And a lot of companies are trying to deal with this. And that's basically how this is kind of the effects that COVID has on the video game industry, but even the tech industry at large right now.
Thank you, Eric. And I know Matt's about to pop in any second now and tell us that we're out of time. I do want to get, just even from Eric or Brian, we had a question about where could people apply for jobs at your companies? Where should they be directed? Really briefly.
Oh yeah, no, and we're hiring like crazy. Well, here is my email. So if you want to point anyone towards me, but no, if you just go, it's EA World. I think it's eaworld.com or ea.com, and you just look for jobs. We're hiring in, I think it's like 16 countries, and we have so many jobs to fill. Please point everyone towards us, and I'm assuming PlayStation as well. Yeah, I mean, I'd like to have a conversation with someone before they use my name as a reference. But other than that, please use the Michigan State. There are Michigan State alumni that work at EA. There are many of us, and a lot of us excitingly are working on college football right now and talking about the Red Cedar and talking about how Michigan State can look awesome in the game right now. So.
It's funny you mentioned that, Brian, because like my one of the product managers I work with is from U of M, so we always have conversations back and forth about.
I mean, nobody's perfect, right?
But yeah, it's I mean, PlayStation is hiring like we're hiring a ton of people of all disciplines. Not only are we hiring for in the PlayStation like platform, but we're also hiring across all of our different game studios. We have about 17 different game studios that span the globe. So if you're interested, especially and if you need any advice around design, especially your portfolio or anything like that, I can totally help out. But feel free to reach out to me, and I'll put my email there, but in the Zoom conversation. But feel free to reach out, and then also check out if you're just interested to see what the listings are. If you just look at PlayStation Career, if you Google PlayStation Careers, like the first hit will give you the link to it. But yeah, it's a great place to work. It's fun. I've been here for over 5 years now, so I highly recommend it.
Well, we're definitely over time. I can tell this group could go for another hour, but we won't do that. You're all very busy. Thank you all to all our panelists, Carrie, Eric, and Brian, for taking some time out of your very busy schedules to really have a really fascinating conversation. And Matthew, I'll hand it over to you.
Well, and a huge thank you to you as well, Andrew, for being our moderator and taking time out of your day to be with us.
They made my job very easy, as you can tell.
And thank you to those of you who signed up for the webinar and tuned in today. If you're looking to get involved with the college, please feel free to check out our Get Involved website. I'll drop that link in the chat here very shortly. We also have something called our alumni engagement menu, where there's a myriad of ways to get involved with the college, anywhere from small chats with students to large time commitments as well. And so there's a whole bunch of ways to get involved, and we encourage all of you to sign up. And please check back or keep an eye out for future virtual talks and other alumni engagement programs. Thank you all for being here today, and I hope you have a wonderful day.